In the heart of Babylon, the grand city of gold and wisdom, a secret lay hidden. It wasn't a treasure buried beneath the sands, nor was it an ancient tablet lost to time. The secret was far more elusive, yet far more powerful. In the crowded markets and between the towering ziggurats, the people worked tirelessly. They believed they were working for prosperity, but little did they know, they were bound by an invisible chain, a chain woven with ignorance. It is said that a wise scribe once wandered the streets of Babylon, observing the lives of the laborers, merchants, and scholars. He saw the struggle in their eyes, the weariness in their bones, and the uncertainty in their hearts. "Why do you toil so?" he asked a merchant one day. The merchant, covered in dust and with furrowed brow, responded, "I work to survive. Without work, there is no bread." And so it was for many. But this scribe, Baruk by name, understood something that most did not. He knew that work, though essential, was not the true path to prosperity. It was only through understanding a deeper truth, one that transcended the physical act of labor, that a man could truly free himself. And so, Baruk decided to reveal the secret. He began to teach those who would listen, but his teachings were met with confusion and resistance. The truth was too difficult to accept. The people of Babylon, for all their wealth and might, were trapped in a cycle. They worked for wealth, but never learned the secret of wealth itself. It was as if they were running on a wheel, spinning faster and faster, never reaching their destination. They labored for their homes, for their families, for the gods, yet they remained as poor as the day they were born. And so Baruk, with his wisdom, sought to reveal the truth that could set them free. One day, as the sun set behind the great walls of the city, Baruk gathered a small group of people in the marketplace. They were curious, eager for knowledge, but wary of the scribe's words. Baruk stood tall, his robes flowing in the evening breeze. "I will tell you a story," he began, "a story that has been passed down for generations, hidden from the eyes of the common man. Long ago, in a land not far from here, there was a king who ruled with wisdom and strength. He was prosperous, his people happy, and his kingdom thriving. Yet, even in the midst of his success, he was restless. He sought to know the secret to everlasting prosperity, and so he summoned his advisors. 'What is it that makes us wealthy?' he asked. The advisors, wise in their own ways, gave him many answers. Some spoke of gold, others of trade, and still others of conquest. But the king, in his heart, knew these answers were incomplete. It was not gold he sought, nor was it land. He was searching for something far deeper, a truth that cannot be seen with the eyes but only felt with the soul. And so the king traveled far and wide, across deserts and mountains, seeking this truth. In his travels, he met an old sage, a man who had lived in solitude for many years. The sage looked into the king's eyes and saw the restlessness within him. "You seek something, but you do not know what it is," the sage said. "I will give you the answer, but it is not what you expect." The sage told the king that the true secret of wealth was not in the things he owned or the labor he commanded. It was in mastering the mind. To master the mind, the sage said, is to master the world. Only then will you be free of the endless toil that binds you. The king, though wise, did not fully understand, but he followed the sage's advice, meditated on his words, and slowly his kingdom began to change. He found that those who had learned to control their desires, their fears, and their thoughts were no longer bound by the wheel of labor. They worked not for survival, but for purpose. And in this, they found true wealth, the wealth of peace, contentment, and freedom. This, the king realized, was the truth that Babylon had hidden from its people, a truth that would set them free from the endless cycle of work and want. As the king returned to his palace, he was not the same man who had left. The weight of his crown seemed lighter, his steps more deliberate. He had learned the truth that had eluded even the wisest of his advisors. With newfound clarity, he summoned his council, but this time he did not ask them about wealth or war. Instead, he asked them a question that would change the kingdom forever. What is the true nature of the work we do? The advisors, taken aback by the king's question, hesitated. "Your Majesty," one said, "our work is what sustains a kingdom. Without it, the people would starve, the land would wither, and our enemies would take what is ours." The king nodded, but his eyes were distant. "That is true," he said, "but there is something greater than the work itself. There is a purpose behind it, a reason we toil that goes beyond survival." "What is it?" The council remained silent, for they could not answer. They had always believed that work was an end in itself, a means of survival, a way to ensure their legacy. But the king's words stirred something deep within them. Could it be that work was not the purpose, but a tool? And if so, what was the purpose for which they worked? The king, seeing their confusion, decided to reveal the second part of the truth he had discovered on his journey. "Work is not the enemy of prosperity," the king declared. "It is the lack of understanding that turns work into an endless, draining cycle. We toil not because we must, but because we have been taught to fear what we do not understand. If we knew the purpose behind our labor, we would not work for survival. We would work for fulfillment. And in that fulfillment, prosperity would follow." The people, hearing the king's proclamation, were uncertain. How could they work for something beyond survival when their very lives depended on their labor? Baruk, who had heard of the king's new wisdom, gathered a group of people once more in the marketplace. He could see their skepticism. "You wonder," he said, "how it is possible to work for fulfillment when you must feed your children and protect your family. Let me tell you a truth. In Babylon, many work endlessly, chasing after the fruits of their labor. They seek wealth, power, and comfort, believing that these things will bring happiness. But happiness is not found in possessions. It is found in purpose. A man who labors with purpose does not toil in vain. His work becomes an extension of his being, a way to express his talents, his creativity, and his contributions to the world. Imagine a farmer," Baruk continued, "who plants a seed not for the fruits it will bear, but for the joy of seeing it grow. His labor is not a burden, but a gift. Each step he takes in the soil is an act of faith, an offering to the earth. His work nourishes not just his family, but his soul. This is the secret the king discovered. The mind must be aligned with the work, and the work must be aligned with the heart. And so I tell you," Baruk said, "the true wealth lies not in how much you earn, but in how deeply you engage with your labor. When your heart and mind are united in your work, you'll find that what once seemed like endless toil becomes a source of joy. You will no longer work to survive. You will work to thrive. And in that thriving, wealth will come not as a goal, but as a byproduct of living with purpose." The people listened, and some began to see the truth of Baruk's words. They realized that they had been chasing wealth and status, believing that these things would bring them fulfillment. But wealth alone could never fill the emptiness in their hearts. The true treasure lay in finding meaning in their daily work, in finding purpose in every action, no matter how small. In time, Babylon began to change. People no longer worked simply for gold and glory. They worked for the joy of creation, for the satisfaction of contributing to their community, and for the peace that comes with knowing their labor had purpose. The city, once a place of endless competition, became a haven of cooperation, and prosperity followed as a natural consequence. The truth that Babylon had hidden was no longer a secret. It was a way of life. As Babylon flourished with a new spirit of purpose, many travelers began to come from distant lands, curious about the kingdom's transformation. They had heard tales of a city where work no longer felt like a burden, a place where wealth flowed from the hearts of the people, not just from the abundance of gold. They came seeking the secret, eager to learn what made Babylon different. But many were skeptical. Could such a change truly happen? One such traveler, a merchant from a far-off land, arrived at the gates of Babylon. He had heard the rumors of the city's prosperity and was determined to find the source. "I will see for myself," he declared. "If it is true that the people of Babylon work with purpose, then surely I will find the same results." He entered the city with the mindset of one who seeks to uncover a hidden formula for success. The merchant made his way to the marketplace, where Baruk was known to speak to those who sought wisdom. With a cynical smile, he approached the sage. "I have heard your teachings," the merchant said. "You claim that purpose in work leads to prosperity. But in my land, we are taught that prosperity comes only through hard, relentless labor. How can I trust that what you speak is true?" Baruk looked into the merchant's eyes, seeing the doubt and the hardness within them. You have worked hard, I can see, Baruk said softly. But tell me, merchant, when you toil, do you find joy in it? Or is it only the reward you seek at the end of the journey? The merchant paused, for he had never asked himself such a question. He worked tirelessly, yes, but was it for the joy of creation, or merely to fill his pockets? I work for the reward, the merchant admitted, his voice carrying the weight of years spent chasing after profits. I have always believed that wealth would bring me happiness, but I do not feel joy in my labor. I only feel fatigue and, at times, emptiness. Baruk smiled, a gentle understanding in his eyes. You are like the many who labor without purpose. You chase the wind, hoping it will lead you to treasure. The truth you seek, Baruk continued, is not found in the wealth that you accumulate, but in fulfillment of the work itself. When you work with purpose, the reward becomes a natural consequence, not a distant goal. The joy is in the act of creation, in the knowledge that you are contributing something of value to the world. This is what makes the labor light and the reward sweet. The merchant was skeptical, but there was something in Baruk's words that resonated with him. But how do I find this purpose? He asked, his voice softening. How do I begin to see my work as something more than just a means to an end? Baruk placed a hand on the merchant's shoulder. Purpose is not something you find in the external world. It is within you, waiting to be awakened. It is a seed that lies hidden within your heart, waiting to grow. Start by asking yourself, Baruk advised, what it is that you love to do. What brings you fulfillment beyond the reward? In your work, seek to serve others, to create something of lasting value. When you shift your focus from what you can gain to what you can give, you'll find that your labor becomes a source of joy, and prosperity will follow you like a shadow. The merchant nodded slowly, beginning to understand. He left Baruk with a heart full of new questions, and as he continued his journey through Babylon, he saw the truth of the sage's words in the eyes of the people. There were artisans who crafted their goods with love, farmers who tended their field with reverence, and builders who constructed homes with pride. Each one worked not for the reward alone, but for the purpose of contributing to something greater than themselves. The merchant eventually returned to his homeland, carrying the wisdom he had learned in Babylon. He could not forget the truth that had been revealed to him. That work, when done with purpose, brings fulfillment and prosperity in ways he had never imagined. In the years that followed, he shared this wisdom with others, and his life flourished not because of the riches he accumulated, but because of the joy he found in his labor. As time passed, the teachings of Baruk began to spread far beyond the walls of Babylon. The wisdom of purposeful work, of labor that stems from the heart, began to echo in the hearts of those who sought a life of meaning, not merely survival. The world outside Babylon, once consumed with the endless chase for wealth, began to take note of the quiet revolution that had taken place in the great city. In a distant land, a young man, weary from years of working for little more than survival, heard of this truth. He had been a laborer all his life, toiling under the sun, lifting heavy stones for the king's new temple. Yet, despite the long hours and the sweat that drenched his brow, he felt no satisfaction in his work. He had built walls, he had laid stones, but they were only bricks in a never-ending cycle of labor. One evening, as he rested by the side of a fire, he overheard a group of travelers speaking of Babylon. They say the people of Babylon no longer work for gold. One of them said, they work for the joy of their craft, for fulfillment of their purpose. No one is bound by endless labor there. They are free because they understand the secret of their work. The young man, curious and desperate for a change, decided to set out for Babylon. He had nothing to lose. When he arrived, he sought out Baruk, hoping to learn the wisdom that had transformed the city. I am tired, the young man said to the sage, tired of working for nothing more than survival. I have built walls, but never a home. I have carried stones, but never built a future. How can I find purpose in my work? Baruk looked at him with kindness, his eyes understanding the young man's struggle. You are not alone in your weariness, he said, but the answer lies not in the work itself, but in the way you approach it. When you see your work as a burden, it will always feel like one, Baruk explained. But when you see it as an opportunity to contribute to something greater than yourself, it will become a source of fulfillment. The temple you build is not just a structure of stone, but a place where people will come to find solace, to pray, to find meaning in their lives. Your labor becomes part of something eternal. The young man listened, his heart stirring with a new understanding. "But how do I change my perspective?" he asked. Baruk smiled, his voice soft and gentle. "Start by asking yourself, what is the true value of what I do? What is the purpose behind my work?" When you shift your focus from the task itself to the impact it will have, you will find that your labor is not just a means to an end, but a way to create something of lasting value. "It is not enough to work for the reward," Baruk continued. "True prosperity comes when we labor for a greater cause. Your work is your contribution to the world. When you see your role as part of a larger whole, you will begin to feel fulfillment that comes from knowing you are making a difference. And in that difference, wealth will come, not just in material form, but in the richness of a life well lived." Inspired by Baruk's words, the young man returned to his work with a new sense of purpose. He no longer saw the stones as mere obstacles to his survival, but as pieces of a greater whole. Each stone he lifted, each wall he built, was part of a sacred task, to create something that would last beyond him, something that would serve the community for generations to come. Over time, his work transformed. No longer did he feel the burden of endless toil. Instead, he felt a deep sense of pride in what he was creating. His labor was no longer just a way to earn a living, but a way to contribute to the world. And as he found joy in his work, he discovered something even greater: the true wealth that comes from living with purpose. The young man's life was no longer defined by the struggle to survive. It was defined by the joy of creating, the fulfillment of contributing to something larger than himself. As he worked, prosperity followed him, not as a goal, but as a natural consequence of living with purpose. And in this, he found the truth that Babylon had revealed, that a life of meaningful work is the true path to wealth, freedom, and fulfillment.